Hey everyone, Lauren from A Girl and Her Wool here. So today's vlog is going to be about 2020 reflections. So probably similar to a lot of you, when I went into 2020, I had set a few goals for myself from a crafting perspective. So I'm just going to reflect on some of my 2020 crafty goals, talk a little bit about what projects I did this year, and then also talk about kind of what my business, A Girl and Her Wool, goals were and how those went. And then next week I'll be doing a vlog that I will talk about my 2021 goals. So this is going to be all about 2020 reflections and how I did this year with my crafty goals. I will say a couple of things off the bat. One, I didn't bring the projects I'm going to talk about, I didn't bring them down here. I'm not sure yet if when I'm editing I'll insert photos, but I will say that a lot of them I did Faux Friday posts on the YouTube channel, and so if that's true, I will link to the video down below. So if you want to see more of a project that I mentioned, you can go watch those videos. And then on Saturday morning, so if you're watching this on Friday evening when it airs, tomorrow morning there will be a blog post that kind of recaps a lot of this, and I'm gonna have pictures and links there, so you can also, if you're interested in seeing more, go head over there. And so just to kind of keep this video down, I like to keep the time shorter. I'm just not gonna hold them up and anything like that. I'm just gonna kind of briefly talk about projects quickly. All right, so okay, so I have notes here, which is why I'm looking off to the side. But so for going into 2020, let's get comfortable. So I should have brought my knitting. That's okay. I don't knit anymore. So for 2020, I went into the year saying I wanted to knit about 25 or craft about 25 projects. It's kind of weird, I think, to put a number on it, but I was kind of around the 20 to 30 range for the past few years. I knew that going into this year I was going to be busier with my business and I wouldn't necessarily have all the crafting time, but I thought 25 was like a good thing to hit, and I was getting close to it kind of earlier in the year, and then in the later part of the year I didn't really finish anything, so I ended up finishing 23 projects. Yes, 23 projects this year, so basically there, and I think that's a good amount of projects. We'll kind of talk about what they were, but for me, having two jobs, basically getting 23 projects done was really a good goal for me. I'm pretty monogamous. I don't carry too many whips around. Usually I finish things that I start, so I think getting 23 done was a good amount. So I will say 22 of those projects were knitting. Oh, so technically I guess I kind of finished 24 projects. So 22 projects were knitting. One project was a crochet project, and I did finish a hand spun skein, so I think that counts. So 24 projects. I kind of looked at Ravelry, so I don't think they count like a finished skein in your project count, but anyway. So this was the first time that I had a finished crochet project, which was really exciting. I knit the Rainbow Showers wrap, which was a really great beginner pattern. It is like on the bias, so you do decrease and on one side and increase on the other, so it's not just a simple kind of crochet back and forth. You are doing that, which to me is great. It was a long rectangular scarf, so I figured if it were just straight back and forth I'd probably get bored, but because of this I had a few skills I had to learn. I had to restart it. It was a really great way to learn crochet. I did start a crochet scrap blanket, and so I had some experience in crochet. That was kind of like a pick up, put down type of thing, and so this was the first time where I really sat down to like learn crochet. So I'm proud of finishing that. And then into the knitting project. So now I'll talk very generally here. So I did finish 7 pairs of socks. That's a low number of socks for me, especially given in 2019 I did all 12 months of the Desert Vista Dye Works Club, and in addition I also knit other socks along the way, so I had it over 12. So this year only doing 7 was not that many pairs of socks, but I knew going into this year I was a little burnt out on them, so that doesn't surprise me, and 7 is probably even a little higher than I would have expected going into the year. But I will say every single day of this year, all 365 days of 2020, I had a pair of socks on the needles. So there was that. So one pair was for my niece. So that was a quick pair of tube socks. So that was really fun. Otherwise, a bunch were shop samples and then skeins out of stash, which that is a bigger thing that I will talk about in a bit. So 7 pairs of socks. So then I also finished 2 sweaters this year, which I feel like is a good amount, 2 sweaters. I am definitely growing my appreciation for hand knit sweaters because in the past they were always like so special. I had to wear them out of the house. It had to be like I was gonna see people or I was going to work. But now with the pandemic, I've gotten more of an appreciation for wearing hand knit sweaters around the house, and so I'm actually wearing them more and using them more. So this year I finished the Altheta sweater, which is a pattern by Jennifer Steingass, out of Rauma Phenol PT2, and I have been living in that sweater. It's too big on me, but it is so comfortable and it doesn't make me too warm. It's like seriously the perfect hangout sweater all day long, and I have definitely been wearing it. It's even been like when I'm in pajamas, I just throw a sweatshirt on, and instead I've been throwing that on. Like that's how much I've been wearing it. It's just always on. And then I also finished my Pavement Sweater, which is a Vera Valimaki pattern. And I knit that with Once Upon a Corgi, who is now Plies and Hellhounds, I think. Once Upon a Corgi yarn on the tweed base. And so because the yarn is so tweedy, I wanted a simple pattern, and it works so well with the Pavement Sweater, which is just like a looser gauge, or at least for me, like a looser gauge, not oversized but not fitted either, kind of like a tunic-y type sweater, and it just like falls nicely. I think that one like looks nicer, and the Altheta sweater I probably wouldn't wear to work just because it's too big on me and it looks a little schlumpy. This one just looks nice, and I'm living in that one too because the yarn itself is so soft and nice. So 2 successful sweaters that I have been living in. So happy about that. I completed, so these are, I'm not even including my whips in this. So I completed 5 shawls and or wraps this year, which is not surprising. I love knitting shawls, so for me it makes sense that I was always knitting them. So that includes the Drachenfels shawl, which again I'm going to talk about a little bit more later. I did the Rainbow Showers one, the crochet one I talked about already, and then I did some shop sample ones. So I did the Time Trade shawl in like my rose gold collection earlier in the year. That was a big hit. The Neon Bricks, the Painting Bricks pattern by Stephen West that I knit out of the Neon Unicorn gradient set. I always call it the Neon Bricks pattern, but it's not. That's what my project was called because I use Neon Unicorn. So that was really fun to kind of show off a gradient, and that was my first Stephen West pattern, so that was really fun. And the last one was the Mimeograph scarf or wrap, which was a collaboration. So that was my first collaboration with Pam Grushkin, and she designed the wrap using the rose gold gradient set, and then I knit it out of the Mountain Springs Lake gradient set. So if you want like a textured but really straightforward pattern with minis or gradient sets, go check that out. I'll link to it in the description box. It's a really fun pattern that you don't get bored by it. I never had the ability to memorize it, so I was always looking down, but really great way to show off a gradient, or if you have precious mini skeins or leftovers, or a variegated, I mean it would work plain with a variegated skein as well, really anything, and go check it out. I also knit 3 hats this year. My mom's gonna laugh at me because I told her the other day I don't knit hats. I knit 3 of them this year. So one of them was the Sam's hat, which I used a kit that I got at from Tidal Yarns. I got it back in the spring of 2019 at my first ever festival that I attended, which was the Connecticut Sheep and Wool. So that yarn is like, I think it's naturally dyed, but it's just Like there's no colorways or anything. She kind of just, I think there were no colorway names or anything. She just kind of dyes yarn and colors as she has them, but they're all just so beautiful. They're all kind of like muted and toned down. And again, I'll link to the video I did on that hat. It was a kit that I got already made up, so she kind of made worsted weight minis out of them, and she pre-planned colors, and I just took that and I had so much fun knitting that, and I love that hat. So definitely recommend that one as well. And then the two other hats that I knit were for shop samples. So I did, one was the graffiti, the 103 hat pattern by Boston Jen. And again, that is just also a simple textured hat pattern. I think I knit that in a 24-hour period, and I used my graffiti colorway on my DK base. And so that makes a really fun hat, a really not super bright, neutral hat that just has like little blips of color, and then it has the texture. So that's a really fun hat too. Definitely recommend that one. And then I did the Kentia hat by Amba O'Brien, which is, I did that on my silk DK base, which is so nice. It's so soft and so warm. And I did it in a colorway called Majestic, which I have not released as a regular colorway yet. That was a kit only colorway, which I will hope to do in the springtime. And Amba also has that pattern as a shawl, and I think she's coming out with like a cowl if she didn't already. It's a really fun slip stitch pattern, so if you like color work but you haven't tried it yet, mosaic knitting is the way to go. It's all slip stitches, but you get color work designs. And she did it with like garter stitch, so it was just like a super fun. I think that hat I also knit up probably within 24 hours. Hats are so quick. That's probably why I don't realize I knit them, because like I can knit them so quick, which is something I should do more while I sit here thinking about the slip extravaganza shawl that I'm still working on. So yeah, got those 3 hats done, which I do love them all. So should be a hat knit or more. So I also knit one cowl, which was the escarpment cowl, and cowls are definitely underrated. They're so nice because they do keep, like, even here I'm wearing like a zip up, right? So if you picture like this as my jacket, like you always have that bit here that's exposed. So that's why we wear like our scarves or shawls or whatever. But cowls are great because they cover exactly that part, but there's no bulk. So like your hair doesn't get stuck, or like it's not choking you under your zipper. Anyway, cowls are underrated. I bought this yarn from my local yarn shop, a Knit Sheep, and it has a cotton base to it. And I had never knit with cotton by any means, but this was a really soft cotton. No problems knitting it. It's super soft and comfortable, but it's also not super warm. So it's great for like spring and fall. And if I left my house more this fall, and if I do leave my house more this upcoming spring, then I will definitely be wearing that, because it's just like a great way to keep this part of you warm without like being bulky and uncomfortable, or too warm in like the springtime when like you need something in the morning but then it gets too hot later on. Like this you would stay comfortable in. So that was a good project. And then I just had like 5 like other types of projects. So this is where I had some preemie hats that I made, some charity projects, some other kind of miscellaneous shop samples. So I did like a couple of baby sweaters, a couple of preemie hats, and something else that I can't remember. Okay, so that recaps very hopefully quickly my 2020 project. So kind of across the board, it was and then yeah, again, so my current whips is my slip extravaganza shawl, which I haven't finished, my Tammy Gore mystery knit along that I have not yet finished, and I have a pair of a vanilla pair of socks, as well as I have the Tan House Brook shawl still on the needle. So that's probably the one project that doesn't fall into like my normal, if I start something I finish it, just because I wasn't even sure if I wanted to start it in the first place. I love the pattern. It's not the pattern, it's I'm knitting it with my hand spun yarn, and I just wasn't sure if I would like my yarn knit up. So that's gonna be like when I finish things and I haven't quite started something else yet, like pick it back up. That's kind of when I knit it before, but that's that. All right, so kind of recapping. So my goals for this year, again, was that 25 projects, but I didn't really hold myself to it. And I am glad that I really knit across the board. So a couple of sweaters, some new shawls, lots of shop samples, hats, socks, everything. So what were some of my other 2020 goals? So one was to knit more, and they're probably pretty standard. I think a lot of you would probably have heard these goals before from other people if you didn't have them for yourself. So one of them was to knit more for charity, and I did do that. So in the past I had never knit for charity, so the bar was very low, and I started off strong with this early in the year. So again, I did knit some preemie hats, and I knit another baby hat as well as a sweater. So did do a bunch of charity knitting, and this kind of coincides with another one of the goals that I had for 2020, which was to use up kind of some of the leftovers that I have. So I have leftovers of yarn, and my goal was to take a ball of yarn that was a leftovers from a pair of socks or from a shawl, whatever it was, crochet a stripe into that scrap blanket that I was working on, which is the Neat Ripple blanket. And then after that, so that way I would have some as a memory. After that, then use up the rest in charity projects. And I did that with a couple of skeins. So I think like 2 or 3 leftover skeins. So it was going really well, but again, when things got busy and I was knitting more samples, that kind of fell off. So I definitely think I was successful in that one, because I did make a few projects. But something that I would probably could have done more of, and would like to pick that back up. So when I do my 2021 goals, you'll hear more of that. So yeah, definitely not a fail, but something I could have done more of, basically. The next goal that I had was to continue spinning 3 times a week and potentially grow that into 5 or more. And for a while, again, I was doing really well with that. I was spinning, I was ending my work day and taking 15 minutes to kind of like decompose and spend 15 minutes at my wheel, and that's when I finished my hand spun project. So the yarn that I'm using in that Tan House Brook shawl, that's when I finished it. And so I was doing really well. Once I finished that project, I just never got the next one on the needle. So I have the fiber right here ready to go, and I just never put it on the wheel. And again, it was one of the first things to go when crafting time got limited. So was a win again, but just didn't become like a lifestyle change. So the last one was to knit the untouched yarn. So I have full skeins of sock yarn in my stash, as I'm sure a lot of people do, and I really wanted to knit with most of those. So keep in mind, I went into this year in a different place than I am now. So I had my hand-dyed yarn business, but it was nowhere near as busy as it is now, which is a great thing. Growth is a great thing. But I probably plan to knit more this year than I did. So this was definitely a win though, because while I didn't knit every single skein that I had in stash, I did knit quite a bit. So the best example of this would be the Drakenfell shawl that I knit earlier this year, which used 3 skeins of yarn out of my stash, and I had bought these 3 skeins back in 2016, so 4 years ago, and I bought them with the intention of knitting them into a 3-colored shawl. So they coordinated, they went together, they were single ply yarn, so they weren't sock yarn, they were meant for this shawl. And I was so proud that I cast that on and worked on it and finished that shawl. So that was probably the best win. That was 3 skeins out of my stash from 4 years ago. And I have a full list. So other things that I knit out of stash was my honeybee dance socks, which was yarn that was gifted to me probably in like 2014. The Sam's hat that I mentioned, I bought that at a festival in early 2019. The Fisher Friends Not Food, a vanilla pair of socks from Laser Sheep Yarn, that was the yarn that I had from 2019. The Altheta sweater I think I bought for Christmas in 2018, so that was a sweater quantity of yarn. and the gingerbread house socks, which was also from a couple of years ago. So I still have some yarn in stash, but way less, and I'm really proud of that. So those were all like great wins. Again, I didn't do much personal knitting this year, and when I didn't do much knitting, and a lot of the knitting I did for samples, and so having that personal knitting with stash yarn was great. So that kind of wraps up like the crafty goals, crafty projects, everything I got done. And so kind of just to recap kind of some of the other goals that I had for my business, so for A Girl and Her Wool. So one of them was to just continue working on the shop and introduce new colors. So again, I'm primarily a dye to order shop, and so I can have a listing of colorways available, basically like a menu, and you guys pick and choose. And so because of that, it makes sense to have more colors to offer, because when you sell in stock only and your quantity is limited, people are happy to like kind of pick what you have available. But when you don't have that like pressure of I have to get this before it's gone, I have to make sure that I have a lot of color choices for people to choose from, if that makes sense. So I wanted to expand my colorway library. I definitely did that. I offered plenty of colors this year, lots of new gradients, and I also introduced my clubs this year, so the mystery clubs and stuff. So I definitely continued working on the shop and got lots of new colorways out for you guys. And it doesn't stop here, because I have already dyed up new colors that will be listed in the shop the 8th, January 8th. So stay tuned for that. My big goal for the business this year, and again, going into 2020 was very different than leaving 2020, was to vend at an in-person show. I really wanted to pressure myself to put myself out there. I had no idea what vending would be like. I still don't, because I haven't done it. But I really wanted to push myself to put myself out there and apply to vend in shows. I knew that I had a good product and that I had a good thing to offer to you guys. But I had to get my name out there. And so I knew that vending in person would be a great way to get my name out there. People could see the yarn in person, touch it, play with it, all that stuff in person. And I knew that vending in person would be a good next step for my business. I applied to a bunch of places, both for the spring and the fall. The spring was late, but I did it anyway, figuring people drop out. Might as well ask places if they had openings available, so didn't formally apply, but more reached out. And those obviously didn't go very well. But I did get accepted into 2 festivals in September of 2020. And I'm fortunate enough that both had not enrollment, but I get to hold the spot for 2021. So I was able to roll over basically my vending fee till next year. And so that's great, because now I'm kind of like in the club, because for a lot of these festivals, if you vended there before, you get first pick into vending there the next year, and then what's remaining is left over for new applicants. And so by kind of getting that first time in, it really helps. And so I am pleased that while I didn't vend in person, that was not my choice. And I'm excited to do it next year, and I really am excited that I put myself out there and applied, and didn't put myself down for being such a new business, and just went for it. So that was a win. So those were my shop goals. I didn't have too many. Again, my shop was new. It was about growth and expansion, and that's what I did. So my 2020 overall theme, when I kind of looked through what all my goals were and what I wanted to do, I thought it was a lot about community. So more knitting for charity. I wanted to be vending and meeting people in person. I also had goals of like participating in sit and stitch and reaching out, being a part of more things online. And so I definitely did that. So I've done numerous collaborations this year. So I mentioned the one with Pam, of course, the collaborations with Amba O'Brien, like that opened up doors for me to meet people and talk to people. And I also sponsored knit-alongs for the pigskin party, the splash web party for the Downseller Studio podcast. I was interviewed with Amba and Jana of the Knit Purl Together podcast. So definitely have reached have put myself out there in the knitting community more. I think I'm talking to people more on Instagram. And then the big one too is starting this channel. So I started this in 2020 and I've met so many of you. I've put myself out there. You guys have met me, of course. It's like a one-way thing, but I do appreciate when people comment and mention things, and some of you have reached out in other ways to say hello and introduce yourself. So grateful for that. And that I get to share like this love I have for dyeing and yarn and all of that. So I definitely feel like I worked hard on putting myself out there in the community more, and I'm just so appreciative of how you guys are so receptive to that. So thank you. So that is it with my 2020 reflections. Overall, it was a good crafty year for me. Of course, there's never enough time for knitting. I could have gotten done so much more, but the business grew very well. And again, I've met so many of you. I've put so much time into this channel. As I sit here with a camera in front of me and lighting and all of that. So if you guys are interested in seeing any of the pictures or links, I will link to my Ravelry projects as well as the individual ones. I'm gonna link to my Ravelry projects, and then I'm gonna link to blog posts about the projects where you can see photos. So if Ravelry is not your thing, you can look at my blog and see photos there. And then you can also check out the blog post that airs Saturday morning. If you're watching this delayed, it's probably already up, where I kind of talk through the same things that I talk through here, but you can kind of see a little bit more details. So again, stay tuned next week because we are going to be doing 2021 goals, as well as I have new colorways coming out. So I'm excited for that. And that's that. So it was an interesting 2020 to say the least, but from a girl in her wool perspective, things worked out pretty well. And I just want to say thank you to everyone if you watch this channel, if you've subscribed to it, and if you haven't, consider doing it right now. If you follow me on Instagram, if you read the blog, have shopped at my shop, just say hello every once in a while, whatever we do to communicate. Thank you so much for being a part of the Girl in Her Wool community. I'm happy to have you here, and on to the next year and on to new things. So I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.